We titled it How to Scale Your Coaching Practice with Async Coaching. The goal is to really talk about this new way of coaching in some ways to some people. But what's exciting about this conversation is we have kind of both ends of the spectrum. Ari, who as I was going through and doing a lot of research, I think he maybe even created this model. It was definitely one of the first, and comes out of a need that he can kind of talk about. And then Phil was someone I met who was seeking out this model and trying to find a solution. So I thought it'd be a really interesting discussion to sort of see both ends of the spectrum, and kind of talk through some of the practical challenges. What is async coaching? How do you get clients onboarded? How do you deal with a lot of the day-to-day, and what are the steps to get there? And so that's what we really hope to cover here. And we'll jump into introductions, but I had this epiphany this morning that this is the first time any of us are actually on a live synchronous call with each other. Ari, I looked at the stats. I think you and I have talked over 6 hours of messages back and forth, and a couple hours for you and me, Phil. And so I feel like I've gotten to know both of you quite well, but we've never had a live or even video of any kind conversation. So this is a first, but it kind of points to the power of what we've been doing, that we're able to build this relationship and discussions up to this point without ever having met in synchronous.
Agreed.
Yeah. So I'll kind of give a quick overview and then ask a few questions here to get us started. But for anyone who's part of this, feel free to ask questions down below the little Q&A button. And we collected some questions before as well. So as I mentioned, Ari, I think you created a lot of this model. You've been doing asynchronous coaching, I think, for about 7 years. I think about 5 years exclusively, I think you said. Ari's also the author of Less Doing, More Living and Replaceable Founder. You can find those on Amazon. And he has done this model with, I think, hundreds of clients up to this point, if not more. He's done about 500 podcasts talking about productivity generally, and async is one of the things he talks a lot about, and worked across a number of different industry in terms of clients using it. And then, as I mentioned, Phil is a recent adopter of this model. I think you've been doing it for about 3 months now, 4 months. Does that sound right?
Yeah, 3 or 4 months.
Yep. Prior to this, had created a $20 million online recruitment platform, and really specialized a lot of his coaching with ADHD clients and some of the unique needs they have. And we'll have a perspective of the first time adoption to this model, coming from a traditional scheduled meeting model into with sessions into this. And then I'm Travis Bogard. I'm the founder and CEO of Carbon Voice, which is a asynchronous voice messaging platform. So we'll talk a little bit about what we do as part of that, but really everything here works across the model of asynchronous coaching. And we just aim to be the best tool for it. So maybe we start off, Ari, maybe you could define for us how you define asynchronous coaching in practice. What does a typical interaction look like? Just kind of help the listeners, the watchers here, understand what it is.
Yeah, sure. So my start was in sort of the traditional model of coaching where, I'd meet with a client once a week for an hour, 45 minutes, whatever it was, and then we might have some email interaction in between. And at the peak, I think I had 12 clients at any given time, right? Because that was sort of all I could handle. I was sort of growing this business. I had a budding family. And that was also just mentally, just sitting there for an hour at a time and listening to different things. The other thing is that I was recognizing that with the pace of business for everybody, a lot of things could happen in between sessions that email was not quite doing justice for. So having sort of cut my teeth in that model, during the pandemic, and it wasn't really because of that, the business was actually doing okay. I had a group coaching program. I was, in a lot of ways, removing myself from the coaching practice because that's what the whole replaceable founder is about. And I got to this point where I was sort of so removed that I realized I was missing the very thing that I loved doing the most, which was interacting with people and coaching. And sort of on a whim, and we were using Voxer with our highest level coaching group, and they could have access to me, but primarily they were coming to the live calls and meetings and things, and events. Actually, we're doing in-person events. So the I one day I just Voxed, and at the time I was using Voxer, used Voxer to a client. I was like, hey, I'm thinking about trying this thing. Here's a price. What do you think? And they got back to me very quickly. Like, oh my gosh, yeah, one-on-one coaching with you. Yeah, let's do it. And I was like, okay, great. And then I asked another client and they said yes. And another client said yes. And another client said yes. And so right away I was back into private coaching, but very, very quickly recognized that, you know, I was spending 20 minutes a day now coaching like 6 people, which was incredible. And I started off right away. I was like, that's going to be unlimited. We'll see what happens and we'll see how this works. And originally it was a matter of convenience for me. And what I very quickly found, was that asynchronous coaching has become a more effective form of coaching than I've ever experienced before. And I think it comes at it from both sides, from the client side and the provider side. From the provider side, you're able to, and this is going to sound weird, but I think you're actually able to be more present when you're not live with the client necessarily. Because to sit with somebody for 45 minutes or an hour and mostly probably listen and take things in, maybe take notes, you're going to be thinking of things while they're talking. You're going to be coming in and out. You're going to see shifts in the way that they react and the blinking and all of, and it just changes the dynamic of it. And you're going to be thinking about what your next client is. And, oh, that's an idea that I should mention to this person. And maybe that's me. You know, Phil probably can speak to this really well in terms of dealing with ADHD people, but I find it very difficult sometimes, a lot of times, to be really truly present with one client, much less multiple clients at a time or in a row. So from the provider side, I found that, you know, if I can listen to it when I want, at the speed that I want, as many times as I want, and then I can digest it and I can respond with, you know, the 90-second answer that they really need, it's just so much more effective for me. And certainly, you know, with Carbon, you can delete a message, you can record it in your voice memos and then send it. So I get like a, you know, practice run sometimes. And that means that I'm delivering a much better form of coaching, I would say, than ever before. And then from the other side, right, the client basically, instead of having to, you know, on Friday they have a blow up fight with their partner and they want to fire somebody, instead of waiting till Wednesday for our noon appointment for 45 minutes to that at that point maybe it doesn't even matter. They can walk out of that meeting and with all the emotion and rage and, you know, whatever that they're feeling in that moment, with voice, convey so much more information and get it off their chest and then get an answer before the weekend is over, you know, and move on with their thing. So that it again, it started as a convenience, but I think it is actually more effective coaching. And the last thing I'll say, I know I keep talking, is I feel like it used to take maybe 4 to 6 months to really gain a level of trust with clients where they started opening up about all sorts of other things. And with asynchronous coaching, it is significantly cut down. I'd say it's almost always less than a month now, because when somebody can just talk into the ether, you know, without any sort of interruption or judgment in the moment, they will talk themselves into more informative and deeper information. So it's been a really fascinating experience, and I wouldn't do it any other way.
That's awesome, and great overview of all the advantages and sort of how that works out. So, Phil, you're new to this model. You know, what were you trying to solve that kind of brought you into it? What Ari said resonates and was sort of the exact things, and were there some other things that kind of caused you to seek out this model?
Yeah. So a lot of that does resonate. So I mean, we haven't talked about, you know, ADHD and who might or might not be or anything, but, you know, the distraction thing is real. You know, my coaching calls, you know, these days, you know, one-to-ones have been reduced to 3/4 of an hour because it is hard. It is hard to remain focused and things, you know, on the topics that you're talking about. I do agree with the emotional regulation piece that Ari mentioned as well. It's a lot easier for people to get their thoughts and feelings out in the moment. And the worst thing that someone can do is, you know, go back after, you know, a terrible Friday and, you know, then not be present with their family and all of that kind of stuff. And this does give them a real opportunity to almost verbally journal, really. Now, the great thing is that there is someone else on the other side. It's not just a verbal journal to, you know, a recording device. Or there is someone on the other side listening to that, understanding that, you know, catching what it is that they're really saying with this. And that is one of the big benefits, I would say. So I think I came at it from the perspective of it's similar actually to Ari, that I think I started out thinking this is going to be, you know, fantastic from my perspective. You know, I can reply when I want to. But then I started to see some of these, you know, significant benefits from other people. I have a customer at the moment. We're doing interview work, an executive customer, and the platform's been fantastic for that. Absolutely fantastic. You know, we do practice backwards and forwards. Now that's going to be a lot harder to do in a one-to-one call. You know, I need to give some feedback, they need to reevaluate, they need to have another go, and so on. It's absolutely fantastic for those kinds of interactions. So whilst, you know, there is undoubtedly benefit from my perspective in being able to, you know, use some additional minutes, I also get to regulate myself. And I think, you know, Ari maybe highlighted a little bit about the you know, our own need and our own emotions and our own energy levels. You know, there are some times where my energy levels might be a little lower. Being able to reply at a time that suits me is also beneficial. You know, it might not be exactly 9 o'clock, it might be 11 o'clock or something. So everyone seems to get the best of everything, you know, when we're in this kind of asynchronous world. And I would certainly say, you know, from my perspective, it's been the advantages have been both to myself as the coach, but significantly also to the client. They get to say the things that they want to say in the moment, and not wait until the next call in 2 weeks' time or something. And speaking just briefly about the ADHD side of things, many of my customers won't even remember, you know, it's in a week and a half. What happened to them a week and a half ago, that's gone, you know. So we'll sit in a session and go, how's this last month been for you? And they'll say, oh, it's been great. And then we'll dig a little bit, and then suddenly you realize that, you know, the business almost fell apart mid-month or something. It's hard to remember all of those things, say specifically from an ADHD perspective. So there are significant advantages to dealing with these things right in the moment.
It's interesting. The one thing you'll both touched on is, you know, I think it's very easy to think in terms of the client always and forget that there is a person on the other end of that client relationship. And at the end of the day, that person, you know, also has emotions, feelings, energy, things to manage. And ultimately, how that's managed affects the product that the client is getting. And so, you know, a lot of research of, you know, after we eat and, you know, the post lunch slump and things like that, it's like by being able to like find what's the rhythm for you really changes the product that shows up for the client, which I hadn't fully connected before, but that's super insightful. Really
One more
great.
point, if I may, on that. Sorry,
Yeah.
apologies. The other thing that I've really kind of noticed is that this slow, gradual change is so much easier for clients to deal with and manage. So if you almost think of it like, you know, you're asking them in a coaching call to make a big 30-degree shift or something, a 1 degree shift 30 times is so much easier for people to manage. So it's not only, you know, the benefit obviously say to us, but it really is significantly beneficial to them as well.
Yeah, yeah, I can totally appreciate that. I remember in mini coaching sessions, certain days I would show up and it was like, great, everything's calm. My Slack's not getting blown up. People aren't pinging me left and right. I'm like here, ready to talk about things. And then other times I was just like, it was 20 minutes of landing just to try to get my head into the session because I was rushing from something else. And so it plays on both sides for sure. So maybe talk a little bit about how the practical implementation of this has gone. Whichever wants to start off, but I'm kind of curious, just like what's the rollout process? Obviously, I'm assuming it's very different. I know Ari, you've been in a model where you've been sort of exclusively doing this for a long time, so you've got a client base that's already expecting this. Whereas Phil, you have a client base that is doing the traditional model. Maybe you're trying to move some over. Maybe you're trying to bring new people in through it. So maybe just talk about like what's the implementation look like for someone who's saying, okay, this sounds interesting. Where do I get started?
So, do you want
No,
to
I was
go,
going to
Phil?
say you
Yeah.
definitely go first on this.
So there's a few things here. So the first thing is that I always, whenever somebody makes an intro or they want to get on a call or something, I to some degree of respectfulness, I always try to do as much as I can. Usually I'll basically be like, look, I don't really do calls. So if you're willing to get on this platform, we can talk. This actually just happened twice today. So somebody made an introduction for me to be a speaker at an event. And I have, granted, I can say this because I've spoken on, hundreds plus or hundreds of stages in, 7 or 8 countries at this point. But even so I was basically like, yeah, and they want to do a pre-call essentially. And my take at that one is like, there's 100 videos of me speaking, like, what I speak about. We don't have to have a meeting about it. They gave me their Calendly link. And I always love when I see a Calendly link. I used to use Calendly all the time. It's a great tool, just not for me. And so I basically responded as like, thanks so much for considering me. I really avoid calls like the plague. It's the only way I'm able to do what I do is because I don't get on calls. I don't do meetings. Obviously I'll be available for the actual event, but if you're willing to get on this platform, you can go to, and I have a URL that I got, which is talktoari.com. It's one thing I highly recommend people doing is get like a vanity URL that goes to their, in this case, carbon profile. Makes things so much easier. What I used to do, and I'll come back to that in a second. What I used to do is I'd talk to Ari.com, would go to a YouTube video that explained what asynchronous communication was and then how to reach me. Now I just have them go right to the Carbon link. It's a pretty easy onboarding process. But basically I was like, look, so this is how I'll communicate. If that's works for you, great. If not, thank you for considering me. But so sometimes I'll take that hard line where it's like, if you want to talk to me, this is the way we're going to talk. And it's not me being a hard ass. It's me being like, I'm not going to want to get on this call. And that's going to come through in my attitude and the way I show up on that call. And I recognize that, and that's okay, right? As long as we can sort of recognize that. So the people that do get on, it's pretty simple because that becomes like the sales process. Now they're already on the platform, and I'll always tell people like, hey, get on, like ask me questions. I've gone back and forth with people for literally months in some cases. I have somebody who I have been speaking to for 3 years asynchronously, never had a call, and this person is going to sign up for coaching with me in September, right? So maybe I've exchanged an hour or two of audio with this person over the last 3 years, and it just wasn't the right time. But then they had a question and I had an answer, and it's like no skin off my back to nurture that lead in that way. And now that's going to work out, and you're able to invest a lot more effort and time in these things sometimes because it doesn't take a lot of effort and time to do this kind of stuff. And then the other thing is that what I tell people who are starting out and they're like, oh, I can't tell people I'm not going to get on a call with them. What I used to do, and what I do sometimes still, is I give people the choice. They have a choice and autonomy around it, right? And I'll tell people, hey, I have a really crazy schedule. I've got 5 kids. I'm doing this, this, and this. My next opening to have a meeting or a call is 3 weeks from now or 6 weeks from now, whatever. And I'm like, it's just the truth. You know, I just have such limited bandwidth. That's the time. So if you want to do that, we can totally book that time. If you want to get on a conversation right now, you can go to this link and we can probably resolve your issue in the next hour or two. And 9 times out of 10, people will take me up on that. I just had that happen this morning. A friend made an introduction. The friend was like, "Yeah, this guy is kind of old school. He's not on Carbon. I don't know if he'll do that, but I'd really appreciate if you can meet with him." And I said this to that guy. I was like, "Yeah, we can talk in 3 weeks, or you know, talk to me right now." And this was like 3 hours ago, and I've already conversed with that person, made the connection, and sort of like moved on. So that's the best thing too, is give people that choice.
What about you, Phil? How have you been? And I want to come back to Ari, some of these dynamics of getting people on, because I think there's some magic in some of this. But still want to hear your perspective first.
Yeah, I mean, so the first thought, you know, as I was listening to Ari is, you know, it's good to hear people with, you know, clarity and kind of, you know, boundaries that are important to them. These are good things. So for me, what's it been like? Well, I'm new to this, as you know, and we've talked about this backwards and forwards, you know, how to make this work. How does it work? How do I get people in? How do I get people on? I don't think I've got the right solution yet. I actually do like the idea of having a URL. I'm going to steal that if that's okay. And so yeah, so this side of it for me at the moment is still a work in progress. I've actually just not long since come back off holiday, although my skin tan level wouldn't really show you that. But anyway, and I actually introduced some people to the platform whilst I was over there. I tend to get you know, like an inquiry every day or two or something, and I thought I'll give this a bit of a go. You know, I'll try this out with a few people and see how it works. You know, can we start this conversation in a different way? And we did. We managed to do that. You know, I now have three more customers, I think, on it, purely async. They don't have any one-to-one calls with me. They are able to book and buy them if they want to. That's my kind of little sort of lead into the process, I suppose. But yeah, you know, I got a few customers in. We just started talking, and I liked the general introduction to the platform. I think it's easy to, you know, for people to kind of get to and get, you know, through to me. You know, that has worked, although I think in the very early days I was a bit confused with some bits. But no, we've sorted all that out. And yeah, I actually find that it's a nice introduction. And certainly when it comes to kind of ongoing coaching and things, I have a bit of a similar thing. You know, the chances of me having a coaching call available or a discovery call available, you know, in the next week, some weeks is quite low. You can be waiting a week or two for me. Well, suddenly you've lost the person, you know, they're thinking about, you know, I need this solution now. What can you do for me today? And the answer is, well, nothing. I can't help you today because I don't have availability. So so it does, I agree, you know, get that conversation just started without without needing to have, you know, an actual call booked. That's a significant advantage, I would say.
Yeah, I think once you're in the model, you totally get the value of the speed of getting the conversation going. The fact that, as Ari, you said earlier, I find you can get to a depth that just doesn't usually happen on calls until many iterations later. And you know, I think a lot of the dynamic here is ultimately how do you get who has the power dynamic, and then how do you get comfortable managing it in the 3 different scenarios? One where you have the right to say, I'm not doing this unless. The other is one where you really want to talk to them, but you know you're going to be able to talk to them sooner and likely longer if you can actually get them in. But you really need something from them. And so the dynamic has shifted. And I think the tool set you laid out, Ari, is a great spectrum, right? One, I have virtually any salesperson who reaches out to me, I basically say, I'd love to hear about what you're doing. Just make your pitch to me here, and then I can ask, follow-up questions. And that's been great because there's a lot of ones I would have ignored in the past that all of a sudden I'm learning about what they're offering, and I'm like, oh, this might be interesting at some point. So it's given them access in a way that can't, but that's clearly a power dynamic where I can, if they want the sale, they're going to do it. But I have had a lot of success in the other way, which is people who I really want to talk to. I just offer the options where, even as simple as I'm interviewing someone right now, and I'm doing some reference interviews. So I'm wanting to talk to the references, quickly to kind of round out the picture of them. And so those people are taking time out of their day. I reached out to a bunch of them, and they're all trying to set up calls. And I said, hey, we can also do this other. Happy to do a call if you prefer that, because it's your time. Prefer it. And a number of them, both, I did that at 11 p.m. last night. By 5 a.m. my time, they'd all replied. And so we have asynchronous conversations going, and the reality is I wouldn't have even gotten them on a call until later today, and it would have taken time out of their current jobs and busy schedules to do it. So I think a lot of people get that value transfer once they're given a choice. I do think the other thing that I've seen, I'm curious if y'all been seeing, if you see a lot, Ari, is sometimes people try it, but the first message is, okay, cool, I'm here. Now what do I do? Are we scheduling the meeting? That's almost like always the first message. And at least my solution to that is usually to ask a question, because as soon as you ask a question, then they start to natural human behavior is to respond. So that's kind of the method that kind of gets people pulled in and realizing, no, we can actually have the conversation here. But Ari, are there other tips along those lines that you've used?
Yeah. So, well, there's two things. One is, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Founder about Ray Kroc and McDonald's about review. Yeah. So,
Yeah, I
do you
love that
remember
movie.
do you remember the first time when he goes to the McDonald's and they give him the food and he's like, where should I eat it? And he's like,
Yes.
wherever you want. This is it. Like, you can take it over there, you can go over there, whatever you want. So I've definitely had that on where people on the platform, it's like, all right, now what? It's like, you're doing it. Like, this is it. I will come back to that. I want to mention something that you sort of touched on. I think it's an important thing for people to understand in general in your business, that when you make accommodations, what you are actually doing is breaking away from your processes. And that's something that, like, I want to say that again, right? So when you make accommodations, you're breaking with process. And this can come into so many different areas of your business. And ultimately, a business falls to the level of its processes, right? So your processes are super important to how you grow, how you scale, how you operate. And there are times when it's going to be justified and make sense for you to break from process. Like you said, Travis, there's some people you really want to talk to. So in those situations, like, okay, I'm going to step aside here, but you got to recognize what you're doing. And a really good example of that is sales. So for the longest time, as many people are when they're growing a business, I was the main salesperson, and all the sales had to be with me. There were sales calls. This was before asynchronous stuff. And eventually I had a team around me and I had salespeople around me. And inevitably you would get the person who's a client, and they're like, hey, Ari, I want to refer this person. They're, really great fit. Like, can they do their intro call with you or whatever? And it was really hard, but I had to get to the point where I was like, no, I can't do that sales call because I don't know our process at this point. We've got a really great sales process, and evident by the fact that we have such a high retention rate and so little churn. It's like, but I don't deliver that. I honestly don't even know what our sales calls look like. So if they have a sales call with me, I'm going to forget to tell them about these 3 benefits because I don't run that. I'm not going to tell them about the, refund policy, the guarantee. I don't know any of that stuff. Like, so they're going to get a poor experience, and they're going to start off with a poor experience. So you have to have these processes in place. So I'm really a stickler when I tell people, like, yeah, we can do a call, sure, but I'd rather do it this way. And it's not like just like, hey, I don't want to make the time. It's really like, you're not going to get a great experience the other way. Like this is what I've built up. This is what I deliver, and this is how I know what I deliver is good because I do it this way. So I think that's something really important for people to sort of have in the back of their head and be confident about a good process when they have it. So that's a really big one. When I do get people who come on, you know, it's just a conversation, and then they'll say something like, "Okay, well, so can we schedule a call?" I really try to, at that point, explain the benefits of the platform, really. And Carbon has more benefits than a lot of the other tools out there, in terms of like, well, no, because if we're talking here, then we're going to get a transcript, right, and we're going to get a summary, and if something comes out of this that's actionable, I can automate it and make it into a blog post or a Trello card if I want to. But also, you know, I'll tell people like, hey, I don't sleep very much, and I've got 5 kids, and I've got all these different things. Like, I might answer you with a great answer at 1 in the morning while you're sleeping, or if it's somebody across the world. You know, I could never coach a client in Australia before, and now it's like my second biggest market. So sort of showing those benefits and explaining like, no, it's like having a coach in your pocket. That's a big one for people, actually, is it's like, I used to call it a panic button, but I think that sort of sets the wrong precedent for people, because it's like that's more of like an emergency, and I'm not necessarily going to be there for that. But it's more like uh, uh, you can sort of use the cartoon model that works for you. You know, the genie in the bottle, the coach in your pocket, whatever you want. But it's like on-demand companion, the whisperer.
Absolutely. So you were smiling on a couple of things. Did you have something you wanted to add, or?
Well, to be honest, I really agree with it. You know, the coach in the pocket thing, I've actually used, although I don't think we've actually talked backwards and forwards, but I've used that as a description, and it really lands with people. They like the idea of having, you know, the access that's you know, that's particularly important to them. You know, in that moment, it's always that thing. You know, panic, as you say, might not be quite the right fit, but you know, the coach in the pocket really works well. Very interestingly, I once had a coach that was doing async stuff. So it was actually just through, you know, a different platform. But so I've been on the other end of this. And I have to say, you know, as someone that was on the other side of it, I loved the fact that we were having these very short, ongoing conversations, which was brilliant for habit building. You know, and this is one of the key things for me with ADHD people, you know, habit building can be really, really hard. If I say to you, you need to go and do these things over the next few weeks, well, the chances of them getting done is not always that high. And that's not the person's fault. It's just how our brains work. So yeah, it really does provide people with the opportunity to keep this kind of flow, going, this, rather than just getting almost like information and then taking no action. It gives us so much more opportunity to, I was going to say keep people accountable. I think, accountable can, obviously be a multitude of sins, but certainly keep them, keep that in their thought processes as they're going along in their week. So yeah, it makes a really big difference.
So
let me add one more thing to that too. And this may be a little bit specific to me and sort of like where I'm at in my career, but one of the things that I've also found to be such a great benefit of it is I have had many, many, many situations in my life around my business, considering what I do with outsourcing automation, where I have to convince somebody that they're actually talking to me. Right. So it's a lot easier to do that with voice. Right. And obviously now we can do like, hey Jen, and you can do avatars and you can do voice cloning. But when somebody messages you, and in some cases, a couple minutes later, you're like, hey, so and so, like blah 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 blah, like it's thanks for getting on here. It feels, I think it feels very real, and the fact that it does feel very real, because you can go sign up right now for a session with Tony Robbins, and you're going to probably be talking to an AI clone, and it's very good. I've actually seen that one, but you just don't know. right? And there's just something very different, I feel like, when it is truly you're getting that person directly, immediately. There's something very powerful about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I want to kind of come back to one thing you were saying, Phil, which I think connects as well, is you mentioned sort of habit, and people trying to sort of stay accountable doing something. And back in a previous career around health behavior change, to study a lot around habits and how do you establish habits. And a once a week touch point on a habit, like, it's not going to stick, right? It's not going to, unless the people do the work between. And so I'm kind of curious, in this model, how your touch points are changing. I understand how it can change, but at a practical level, are you clients you were talking to once a week? Are you now literally talking to every day, as they're trying to establish that habit? Like, what are some of the how's the flow changed as part of this?
It was that for me or Ari? Ari, either.
For
Okay.
you to start out, because you
I'll
were talking about habit, but then would love Ari's
okay.
perspective.
Okay, so for me, obviously, I'm still, relatively new to this. So typically my coaching calls are more like every 2 weeks. So I don't tend to do weekly. People can get a little bit overwhelmed. Again, ADHD stuff. So, every couple of weeks allows people, time to just, think and about whatever it is that we've discussed and let it settle a little bit before actually taking action. How has it changed in the kind of the async model? I If I haven't heard from someone in 2 to 3 days, I'll always nudge them. 2 to 3, depending on, maybe the client. Some people will prefer to talk a little bit more frequently. Some people prefer to talk a little bit less. So if I hadn't heard them from in that amount of time, I'll always nudge them. But the interesting thing for me is that and this is a specific, Carbon voice thing. We've always got access to the conversation as we're kind of, moving up. So it's very easy for me to kind of go back and say, oh, how are you getting on with the whatever it was that we've been, discussing? And that makes it a lot easier for me to keep on top of what it is that we're dealing with, in that specific moment. Because, we can certainly in the voice model, I think we can go faster in terms of coaching compared to the non-voice. So what's it look like for me? Well, I have a bunch of people who message me, every day or two. I have a bunch of people who message me, twice a week, that kind of thing. And if I don't hear from them, it's a chance for me to go and initiate a conversation. What's happening with this thing? What's happening with your week? Where are you up to? So yeah, it has actually made quite a big difference to my own interaction with people. Normally I wouldn't expect to hear from people for a couple of weeks or something. So yeah, big change from my side.
So it's interesting because accountability, obviously, like as a coach, we're providing accountability, but I feel like that's not one of the main things that I offer. There's actually a good friend of mine, Peter Shallard, has a company, which is, it's pure accountability. You like talk to somebody every single day, basically, for like 5 minutes to check in, and that's what they do. And there's a lot of benefits of those kinds of things. That's not what I offer. For me, might feel like my service is a lot more push from the client to me, and they really need to be more proactive about the way that they utilize it. But what I have found that is very interesting in that is that I do have probably, I'd say 10% of my clients I speak to every single day. And it could be for, a couple minutes at a time. And then I have the bulk of my clients that I probably hear from once or twice a week. And then I have a couple clients that I probably get a direct message from once every 3 to 4 months. But what I do in addition to the one-on-one is I also do a group broadcast, which is something that I believe, Travis, we sort of, a lot of features you built up for me, thankfully, in Carbon, for me to be able to do that. And so when I stopped my podcast, I did 500 episodes of my own podcast over the course of 8 years, and I just kind of got a little bored of it. This became like my own private podcast. So I do a broadcast message. It's free. Anybody can get on it. It's lessdoingacademy.com. It's in Carbon. and it's listen only, so they can't respond. But I'll have my clients in there too, and I'd say I probably send something in there at least once a week. And inevitably, those clients, particularly the ones that are 3 months, every 3 months I hear from them, they'll say like, I've been listening to the group broadcast and I had a thought about this, and this thing. So a lot of times when I'm voicing those ideas, I'm thinking of three audiences. One is potential clients, right? So there's that lead generation aspect of it. The second one is for existing clients. So it's something that's an idea, and this is the same piece of content, right? The second one is an existing client. So it's something that they can use right now, or they can message me and be like, that sounds awesome. How do I build that thing? How do I do that? How do I hire that person? And the third one is people that work with me or for me, right? Because if I send a message, for example, about, oh, I just built this really cool automation where I can say something in Carbon and now it becomes a Trello card, right? So the lead gen aspect is like, oh my gosh, I didn't know you could do that with Carbon. That's so cool. That's the new people, right? The existing clients are like, show me how to build that right now. And then the people that are working with me or for me are like, okay, I see what Ari did there, and I'll go to Zapier and I can build it, right? So those are the three audiences I'm always trying to think of. I can't always hit all three with every piece of content, but that's what I sort of have in my mind when I do those blasts. So the people that are working with me, or clients rather, have that benefit where they can hear that, but then they can also then have a conversation with me about it.
Yeah, it becomes the nudge that sort of moves all these conversations forward in a way that is very scaled, which is cool. So when both of you said some people talking to you every day, I'm sure people from the traditional model are saying, "Oh my gosh." How do I do that? I'm talking with every one of my clients every day. This is like, the math on it feels like it doesn't work. What do you say to those people? How do you explain how that works? And then also maybe this maybe relates to another concept, which is pricing, right? So when you're used to selling 30 minutes or an hour for X dollars per month, how do you now price when the world is every day the client might be contacting you? How does that work?
So one of the things is that, I mean, this is nothing that I came up with, but I always want to try to be selling impact and innovation, right? And like the result rather than like the hours. Obviously, there's a really high level, incredible mastermind group called the Genius Network that's run by Joe Polish, and it is $35,000 to be a member. And basically, what he says is, if you don't get a $350,000 idea out of the very first meeting, like then we'll give you your money back, and you shouldn't be here. So that's how I usually think about it too. And it used to be, again, that traditional model where it's like, give me 3 months and like you'll get some big aha out of this. But now it's like I can get that before they even sign up to be a client in a 3-minute interaction, sometimes, literally. So pricing wise, I never changed my pricing. The pricing is the same that it was for when I was doing synchronous one-on-one. And to be clear and to be fair, I have reintroduced some synchronous coaching in the last few months. And so basically there's sort of 3 tiers where people get the unlimited asynchronous, and then the next tier is basically them and a partner. So usually a CEO, COO, and they get 2 hours synchronous. And then the third tier is an executive team of 4 to 6 people, and they get 4 hours, but they can break it up and use it however they want. And that's very, very limited offering that I decided to do. But sorry, where was I going with that? Oh yeah. So that's the pricing thing. And then actually, sorry, that was it. Wait, what was the other part of that question?
Well, in terms of how to manage, like the
how to manage it,
overload,
right,
or
thank
like,
you, sorry. So then it's like a matter of telling people like, look, you shouldn't be sitting in a meeting with somebody for an hour, a full hour, right? And if you look at it like a nonfiction book, right? The average nonfiction book has 12 pages of actual content in it. That's like an actual statistic from all these different publishers. So you have a 120-page book, 180-page book. There's like 12 actual pages of real content. The rest is just fluff and stories and whatever. That's what, unfortunately, a lot of coaching sessions are about. And that's okay, because they're still going to get those 12 pages of content. But I'd rather not have to sit through an hour of that. So I can have a client who's messaging me, you know, 4 times in a day or more. I have some that'll message me multiple times in a day. And let's say they talk for 20 minutes and I listen to it at double speed. That's 10 minutes. Great. Not only that, I can listen to that 10 minutes while I'm driving from one kid's activity to another. It doesn't mean that I'm not focused on it, but I mean, I can take that in while also doing another thing, and then I can think about it, and then I can give them back that really quick answer. So what people have to really understand about this is it's not just about the client speaking time. It's about your speaking time too. Because when you are synchronous with somebody like we are right now, I have to perform, right? I'm on stage and I have to perform. I can't say to the person like, you know what, let me go chat GPT that and I'll get back to you. Like I can't do that. And yes, I do that sometimes with clients because I keep ChatGPT projects on every one of my clients with all the documents and all the presentations, all the things that they send me. So there are times where I will go have a conversation with my ChatGPT thing about that client and then come back to them. So it's funny when people look at it like that, they're like, oh, but they're gonna have so much access, so much time. It's like, yeah, but you have so much access to them when they have that hour in that one place that you're not going to be using either. So it gets reduced by both sides.
Phil, what have you been saying?
Yeah, so I agree. I listen to messages at 1.75 is my I think it's 1.75 is my preference. I can get, you know, everything that I need to from the conversation with that. I also, you know, listen to conversations whilst I'm stacking, to use almost like an ADHD phrase. So I'll be doing something else. I'll be focusing on that, but doing something else. It actually helps me get through that, you know, the conversations, and focus on them. The fear, obviously, that people are going to drain all of your time away so far hasn't proven to be the case. I think, you know, I only have kind of one person that I probably hear from like every day at the moment. Other than that, you know, most people a few times a week. They will send me messages which are, I mean, I tend to suggest 3 to 5 minutes is a kind of, you know, a normal amount. Occasionally people have sent, you know, messages that are 7 or 10 minutes long. That's fine, you know, that's what they needed to say. My messages back are probably 3 to 5 minutes most of the time. It depends on the specifics. If I kind of was to look at this from a purely minutes-based approach, I think it would be, you know, about the same as I'm doing with my, you know, current, you know, synchronous coaching. But I think it changes from customer to customer. So I don't think it ever really gets beyond. I think it's, you know, it seems a bit scary maybe. And I think we talked about this a little bit. It's like, oh, you know, just give people almost like unlimited access to you. It did seem a little scary. I have to say it hasn't proven to be a problem. I do make better use of my time. It is probably the key thing. So, you know, I'll go and do you know, a session on kind of async. I'll get through, you know, half a dozen customers' conversations in a relatively small amount of time. So it actually hasn't proven to be a problem. But I think I'm relatively new to this, so I only have a relatively small amount of experience. It hasn't been a problem so far.
And what's
So
your
the other thing I
cadence?
do need to point out, the important thing to point out is that I give no expectation of response time to people. So I would say that on average, I'm probably less than 2 hours for most of this stuff, but I have had multiple times where I've gone on vacation for a week and not told anybody and just, you know, got back to them at the end of that. So people can leave as long a message as they want with me. And it may take me 2 or 3 days to get back to them. And I literally set no expectations of how quickly I'm going to respond. And that's always been a really important one. And I think that naturally people sort of get the throttling effect that if they send me a 1-minute message, I'll probably get back to them very quickly. They send a 15-minute message, or I have one client who has one time sent me 3 15-minute messages in a row. So 45 minutes. I didn't get back to him on that one for like 2 weeks.
And so what's your process and cadence of listening to messages? Do you tend to stripe your day where I'm waking up doing this and then this at this time? Like, do you have moments, or you are doing it responsively to like whenever the messages come in? What's kind of the flow that you
It's actually been really interesting since switching to Carbon and having the really good AI summaries and the AI transcript. I'll actually look at things a little bit more now and more often. I'll check more often because I know I don't have to get to a place where I can listen. But so there isn't, I wouldn't say that there's necessarily a cadence to it. What I would say is that there's very rarely a time where I am like, all right, now it's Carbon time, or now, it's async time. It is almost always while I'm transitioning from one thing to another. Almost always. So whether it's I'm getting in the car to go somewhere, or if it's a short message, it literally could be like I'm walking out of my bedroom to go downstairs to the kitchen, and I'll listen to a message that way. If I'm we've recently moved into a new house and we've been doing a lot of yard work, so I've been listening to things in my earbud quite a bit, messages, and I'll just sort of think through it while I'm like digging with a shovel. So there's almost never a time where it's like, all right, it's Carbon time. Like it's no. And the thing is personally, I know that I'm a much more of an audio-visual person. Reading has always been sort of a challenge for me in a lot of different ways, but I can retain information really well when I'm listening to it. And the other thing that I found, which has been really interesting to sort of test out, and Phil, you might appreciate this too for ADHD stuff. Apparently, there's quite a bit of research around this, that when you're doing deep focused work, utilizing your hands, that will cut through the ADHD sort of noise almost better than anything else. So during the pandemic, I got really into woodworking, which I'd never done before. And the idea that I could do something for 3 hours where the end result might be I just throw it out because I was practicing how to make a joint is like insane to me, that could never be something that I would do, but I did. And so there were a lot of times where I would be doing something with my hands, gardening, woodworking, whatever it might be, and listening. And it just would spark ideas in a very different way.
Yeah.
What about you, Phil?
Oh yeah. No, I actually understand that. And so I guess I'm relatively new to all of this and still trying to work out the best solution for me. It's most likely to not end up being specific times. It might be that I do half an hour in one go, but it's very unlikely to be, oh, it's 9:30 and it's time for me to go and do, some Carbon voice. I don't think that will fit. As I say, it's almost better, for me to be, I don't know, cleaning the kitchen or something, and kind of listening at the same time. It sounds like you won't be focused, but in actual fact, I find the opposite. I find I have better focus. So yeah, it seems to reduce my distraction level down when I am doing, those kind of multiple things. And that would make sense from an ADHD perspective. We know this. It's definitely a thing, and well kind of, so yeah, for me, I'm still finding my cadence, if you want to use that term. I think there will always be. So for me, so far I've had a few customers so I'll send them maybe a message and they'll come back almost immediately, and I'll be able to almost immediately send them another message. That's, a very comfortable interaction for me. And I agree with Ari as well about the AI, transcripts and stuff like that. I might listen to the call and then come back to it later, after I've had some time to maybe think about what that person really needs. Not having to re-listen to the entire call again has made a really big difference to me in that. Otherwise, I would be almost panicking, thinking I'm going to have to listen through this again, to catch up on the points. And I don't have to, I mean, the AI will do a great job of giving me like a really good bulleted summary, or those kinds of things. So so that has been fantastic from me from a productivity point of view and how I'm choosing to use my time.
So, as a recent adopter of this, have there been, any challenges that you can kind of speak to, pitfalls, unexpected benefits as well? Just kind of what's kind of the things that you got stuck on? Were some of the things that sort of surprised and delighted you?
I think, because I
So,
mean, this
oh,
really. Oh, sorry.
no,
Was
please,
that for
Phil, go
me?
ahead. I'd like to hear yours.
Yeah, go ahead. Bill.
I mean, I have been lucky enough to be talking to you guys about it for a little while, and that has been really good. I don't think I saw the. I think I saw some of the benefits, but I probably didn't see the potential until I started to hear about, some of the conversations that, we've been having in the background. The idea of going almost like unlimited on it, that wasn't immediately comfortable for me. That was something that I was thinking I don't know, I was a bit resistant towards that. That's probably the biggest resistance that I've experienced. At the moment, I think the unexpected benefit is I'm having customers that are where I'm able to use my time more effectively. So I can be, cleaning my kitchen at the same time. That's a real unexpected benefit. I don't think I expected that. I also tend to do much better thinking when I'm pacing. So it's definitely that's definitely an ADHD thing for me. So I pace quite a lot whilst I'm talking into my phone. That's been a real big benefit. Difficulties, I think most of the major difficulties I'm through. So how do I get people, to engage the first time? It's those kinds of things that, felt a bit uncomfortable day one. It's like, well, how does this even work? How do I get started with people? But those I think have mostly sorted out. I think I will probably end up, similar to Ari in terms of my offerings. There'll be an async option and maybe some async plus synchronous, for people who who need that. Nothing at the moment is sticking out as problematic. I think I've found something of a rhythm, but I think I only got to that when I went somewhat all in on it, particularly during my holiday. I was like, well, I can't do a Zoom call with people, so let's try this and see how it goes. Yeah, so I think most of the big problems I've kind of got through now.
So I'd say that one of the big benefits that I mean, it makes sense, but I never would have thought about it, is that it's a lot easier to qualify leads. And what I mean by that is, like, I'm much more willing to have a conversation with somebody who is clearly not going to be a client because it's not a right fit for them or something, but I'm happy to answer a question or two because it's really, like, it's very easy. And you never know, I might get something good out of the conversation in terms of content. That, whereas, it used to be like you'd have to get on a 45-minute call with somebody to find out in the last 5 minutes that, like, they don't have the money, that kind of thing. And obviously there's ways around that, but that would be very frustrating, obviously. So now it's like, and Travis, I think you've seen this before, but every time I'm on a podcast, anytime I go anywhere, it's like, yeah, just go to talktoari.com, reach out to me directly. Like, it's open door as far as I'm concerned, because I can always just, get back to it when I want, or have a quick conversation and realize that it's a good fit, it's not a good fit. I also take the approach that I can learn something from every interaction, right? So I always tell people, like, reach out to me, tell me what your biggest productivity challenge is. I've probably heard it before, but you never know. And so it's always interesting that way. And then the other benefit I would say too for me is that it's so much easier to turn those conversations into usable content, which is, again, I've used other asynchronous tools before, but it just required a lot more steps. Like, now it's like so much easier to go from, like, hey, they're not going to be a client, this is not going to be that interesting of a relationship maybe, but the thing that I just said or they just asked me, I think we can turn that into something cool. And then the other thing I will say is, it's not a downside. but I still find it very annoying when people get on and they use text and they don't speak. And it's almost like I feel like I've got like blinders on, or like somebody, like there's somebody cut out one of my senses. It's like I can't hear their voice. Like I don't know what they're actually saying. So, but that's a me thing, not a platform thing.
That's super interesting. Well, and know we're really coming up against time here. If anyone has a last minute question, feel free to ask below, but I'll ask one last question. Y'all well, Ari, you were using another tool before, came to Carbon Voice. And then for Phil, I think you started with Carbon Voice. What kind of brought you to Carbon Voice, and why is it relevant for async coaching?
Travis, you reached out to me on LinkedIn and asked if we could have a meeting or something, and I responded with my link to my other asynchronous communication platform. You're like, well, no, actually, I want you to try this one. So that, I mean, I saw the benefits immediately, and I can tell everybody listening that like I have used a lot of different platforms, and this is not WhatsApp, it is not iMessage, it is not any of those platforms. There are 1,000 ways that this is different and better. And so, yeah, you did a great job bringing me over. And honestly, I'll tell you another thing, to your credit, you have done such a great job of taking my suggestions for features and implementing them to the app. And that, to me, is like a really great vote of confidence, because the other tool that well, I mean, I already mentioned it before, but Voxer, which I was a huge Voxer person for a long time, talked to the CEO for years. I have made dozens of suggestions and not one of them has ever been implemented. They're just not focused on innovation the way that Carbon is. And I think that that's really important. And also, I will say that one of the litmus tests for me in general of any kind of platform that I'm going to use, doesn't matter, project management, CRM, anything, is does it have a good Zapier integration? Not just because I want to use Zapier, but because to me that is suggestive of a mindset of the people running the company in terms of how open they are and how innovative they are to connect with other tools and really make it something that's integrated into the way that we work.
That's awesome. Any particular, I mean, you said there are some benefits, any particular features that you find useful in coaching? Like the day-to-day workflow?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, well, and this is, we didn't have ChatGPT 3 years ago, but I do have a file on each of my clients in ChatGPT, and it's so much easier now to just quickly grab the transcript or the summary and put it into that client's thing and be like, here's the latest update. That workflow is just so much more simple. And then, of course, the Zapier integrations, right? So I've got my broadcast can turn into a newsletter. My ideas can go into my Trello. Like I've said this, in a couple different posts, but it's not just a voice communication tool. It is a true like voice powered productivity powerhouse.
Cool. What about you, Phil?
So I actually came to you guys through a friend. We've been talking a little bit. He's in the coaching industry, and there was I think we've been talking about our own kind of productivity and stuff. And he said, "Oh, there's this thing over here that you may never have heard about." And I know he had a brief conversation with you because you tend to talk to people that and you're on the platform. And then I just started using it a little bit with my team, just to kind of test it, see what was going on. Immediately, the thing that struck me was the AIs and the transcripts. I mean, that is really the most useful thing. I can go back to conversations easily. I can get, if I have a 20-minute conversation or 20-minute voice message to listen to, I can get a bulleted summary. So I understand what it is that, that was being talked about. And I can then, I can hit record, go into the bulleted summary and be going through the points that the clients talked about, and know that I'm not going to forget anything, because sometimes my brain will get distracted. ADHD brains do. So that's been instrumental really in the shift, I would say, for me. I really enjoyed that. I'd mirror what Ari said as well. We've been talking about features and those kinds of things. You guys are very open to that kind of conversation, and also willing We are having a conversation backwards and forwards about a couple of things that I've suggested, and at least one of the things that I requested over the last month has came on board actually very quickly. So yeah, I mean that's been a really good engagement. But yeah, so to me, the transcript is where I'm at. It may be that, as time goes on, I'll start doing more with Zapier as well. But at the moment, I'm probably not at that point.
Awesome. Well, I know we've got a little bit over time here. Really appreciate your perspective, Ari and Phil. This has been awesome to kind of hear about it, and looking forward to more and more people learning about it. As Ari and Phil both said, they welcome people to reach out. You can reach out to Ari at talk with Ari, talk
to Ari.com.
Talk to. All right. So talk2ari.com, and then Phil, you're on the Carbon Voice. What's your username?
Well, actually, in the not too distant future, there's very likely to be a talk.phildrinkwater.coach.
All right.
And when I say in the near future, I mean, probably tomorrow.
Great. Yep. So phildrinkwater.coach is his website. He has some links on there as well. And then if you want to learn more about Carbon Voice, you can go to getcarbon.app. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Bye. Thanks a lot.